Lewis and Clark Company of Explorers in October 1804 left the vicinity of the cranky and sometimes threatening Teton Lakota Indians camped near the upper Missouri River. The captains knew that by the end of October they needed to secure an encampment for their approaching winter in what is now North Dakota. Their keelboat and 2 pirogues drifted under sail and paddle upriver, skirting sandbars. Tribal encampments of the Arikara Indians, also known as Rees, were more welcoming than the Sioux emissaries encountered a little further to the south. However, the ravages of smallpox had already struck the Arikara, while the Sioux maintained a menacing encirclement of their settlements. The Lakota Sioux, as their various subgroups came to be called, controlled most of the tolling of traffic in animal pelts along the river. Their dominance as middlemen of the plains fur trade would continue throughout the 19th century until the animal community shrank to insignificance. Less aggressive Indian tribes like the Arikara sometimes made feeble attempts to skirt the Lakota influence with the white traders, but eventually lost out to intertribal warfare and disease. On October 1, 1804, the Corps of Discovery encountered a French trapper, Jean Vallet, who had wintered on at least one fork of the Cheyenne River in western South Dakota. He said that river was hard to navigate, especially if attempted by any large pirogue-sized canoe. But the fork entered a pine-covered Black Mountains, today's Black Hills, sometimes covered with snow. Cheyenne Indians inhabited the area and were known to make a habit 1 month each year of stealing horses from the Spanish in the south. The Sioux sometimes collaborated with them, but also pushed these somewhat less agile horseback hunters out of their own hunting grounds. The antagonism between these Central Plains tribes was fluid, however, and gradually melted away later in the 19th century. It became clear their way of life and reliance on the buffalo for meat and nutrition were threatened by the white man's encroachment, especially in the Black Hills, the Powder River area of today's Wyoming, and along the Yellowstone River Valley of Montana. To the Sioux, much of the Dakotas were called Mako Sika, which translates to badlands. Early French fur trappers called the area Les Mauvaises Terres à Traverser, bad lands to travel across, and for good reason. The Black Hills, though, were another story. Right around the date of the American Revolutionary War, the Lakota reportedly discovered the Black Hills, the heart of everything that is. To Native Americans, especially the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Kiowa, it was the dwelling of good spirits, a hallowed ground, a refuge for people and buffalo alike. And the monolithic stone tower, today named Devil's Tower, was Bear's Lodge, or Mato Tipila, in the Lakota language. Here in northeastern Wyoming, not far from the Belle Fourche River, or Beautiful Fork, and today's Rapid City, South Dakota, buffalo and grizzly bears in their silver-tipped fur, referred to as the white bears, were abundant in the early 19th century. Few Europeans had penetrated the somewhat empty territory here before Lewis and Clark completed their foray across the Louisiana Purchase in 1806. One offbeat journey alluded to in an inscribed lead plate found buried near Pierre, South Dakota in 1913 refers to travelers on the plate as being maybe Chevalier Verandraya and one of his brothers. It isn't clear whether, quote, mountains of the horse Indians they saw were in the Bighorns of Wyoming, the Black Hills of South Dakota, or Wyoming's Laramie Mountains. The history of the Sioux, the Black Hills, Rocky Mountain foothills, the settlers and miners who barged into this far west territory is kind of a circumscribed rendition of the entire march of European civilization across North America. It ended badly for the Sioux and their allies. It ended badly for some of the aspirants to fame in the American military, as well as some of the foot soldier and cavalry sent to root out recalcitrant warriors, usually sons of disgruntled chiefs and medicine men who believed themselves betrayed and defrauded. George Armstrong Custer, a lieutenant colonel in the Army, late in the 19th century intervened as an observer of some indigenous and settler malcontents in the Black Hills that were laced with newly discovered gold. Afterwards, his ambition and reckless underestimation of the stern determination of the region's Indians to resist resettlement lured him to his death, alongside more than 200 of his command at the Little Bighorn River in Montana. The famous Last Stand of the 7th Cavalry conferred a kind of humbling reality check on unconstrained hubris that prevailed among pioneer settlers and miners on the northern high plains. It was only a temporary reprieve for the Sioux and allies, however. The follow-up U.S. Army massacre of nearly defenseless Pine Ridge Reservation Sioux at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota in 1890 essentially eliminated all morale of the original, quote, Lords of the Plains and resistance to the crush of pioneer ambitions. Any visitor to Montana's Little Bighorn Battlefield Monument today cannot avoid feeling empathy for all the parties involved. Heroism is probably a trite descriptive, given the high stakes in 1876. On the other hand, the pictorial and recorded accounts of the Wounded Knee episode afterward cannot convey much, if any, empathy for the federal troops involved in the forced deaths of Spotted Elk's hapless band of men, women, and children shot while trekking toward safety and refuge at the Pine Ridge Reservation. The origin of all the complexity of Sioux domination of the plains until the end of the 19th century is traceable in part to the vast French and British fur trading enterprises of the 18th and 19th century, before the successful American Revolution set off the pioneer expansion into the interior of North America. The Sioux were hunter nomads and had horses to facilitate their predisposition to conduct mounted warfare on weaker enemy tribes. Slave trading and trade in pelts and buffalo robes drew mostly French individuals, many known as mixed-blood Métis, into the Missouri Valley before Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase. Lewis and Clark's company of explorers relied considerably on these hardened men and allies of the native groups to interpret the new American vision and intentions for the future of the wild lands to the west. But the foreigners carried disease and sometimes jealousies. Mandans dying from smallpox began in 1781. Villages of the Arikara and Hidatsa, too, among others, were abandoned along the Missouri River due to both disease and warfare. Lakota contracted the smallpox, but were not as seriously affected, probably because of their more dispersed and nomadic lifestyle. Simply by losing fewer people than their rivals, the Sioux were ascendant along the Missouri north of the Big Bend. A Mandan's, quote, winter count recorded the Lakota attacking a village of more than 50 lodges and killing everyone. The Lakota also chased the Cheyenne to the west and collided with the Crows' homeland on the grasslands west of the Black Hills. Meanwhile, another indigenous tribe, the Comanche, expanded a powerful raiding reputation on the southern plains and New Mexico's borderlands and frontier. They also stole, corralled, and tamed horses, their magic dogs as some Indians called them. Both Sioux and Comanche steered their steeds into the prolific buffalo herds and weaker tribal villages because the lands they were pushing into were not empty. The Comanche, like the Sioux up north, clashed with the powerful and formidable Pawnee in the Platte River country, as well as the Crows, who were also proven horse people living on the flanks of the Rocky Mountains.